Hello, hello, and welcome to Coffee with the Carterman. Here we go. Signs back there in the lit for August 13th, 2026. We got a really big show today, as Ed Sullivan used to say, really big show. As a matter of fact, if all we did today, I'm going to promise you something. If all we did today was the insider interview, you would say to yourself that half hour or so was time very, very, very well spent, because the guy's a genius. That's all I'm going to say about it. Otherwise, I'm going to run out of time doing my intro to the show. So, really big show. We're going to start off with the Carterman Hot Corner. Okay, the Carterman Hot Corner. And as you know, it's a quick, incisive look. Shouldn't take us more than 10 to 15 minutes at the top stories in this week's news. That's very, very important. I'll tell you why it's important. Not just because you get my views on them after, over 40 years at the Washington politics at pretty high levels. And I still talk to my insiders there, not just because of my views, but because you get some insights that you're just not going to get anywhere else. You're just not going to get them. And I think that gives you, I always say, what that does, just between me and you, it gives you bragging rights with your friends and neighbors and relatives, because you know what they don't. Okay. We all love that. I'm sorry. I know we all love that. Okay. Might as well just admit it. So we're going to start off with the Carterman Hot Corner. To me, one of the most repugnant and devastating stories that I've seen in all those 40 years in politics. I call it Massachusetts Murder, Inc., which gives you a hint to what it is. We'll get into it. And then we're going to go to he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. I know it's a little cryptic. Some of you know that old saying, but I'll explain to you exactly what I mean. Even have a Bible quote for you to emphasize the point. Then we have the insider interview. And today's interview is with the gentleman I call Mr. Wizard, okay? And in another week or so, I think starting next week, we're going to have a special segment every week of the program called Meet Mr. Wizard, or Ask Mr. Wizard. And, where we do a 10-minute interview with him on his insight into the news. Because, again, and you're going to see it for yourself when we do the insider interview, this is a bona fide genius, okay? A brilliant man who's right there in Washington, so he knows what's going on. Then we're going to wrap up with my prediction of the week, which I think may not take some of you by surprise, but I think it's one of those inevitabilities, okay? Inevitabilities. So you'll see what it is when we get to it, okay? You'll see what it is when we get to it. So let's start with the Carterman Hot Corner, okay? Let's start with the Carterman Hot Corner. Let me get these notes out of the way here. 9 states now, and the District of Columbia, of course, permit abortion, infanticide. Let's call it what it is. It's infanticide, right up to the very moment of birth, okay? Those jurisdictions are Alaska, just so you want to know where not to go, because it's so damn evil. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to say it. That's just the fact of the matter. Alaska, Colorado, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, D.C., and now, of course, Massachusetts. All right. In other words, they allow abortionists, executioners. Now, I know some conservatives like to weasel the thing on abortion, the women's reproductive rights and all. Folks, we're talking about 9-month-old infants in the womb here. Okay, let's stay on track here. So in these 9 jurisdictions in D.C., they allow the abortionists, the executioners, and it's a proper term to. Let me tell you what AI says this is. In late-term procedures, this is short, medical guidelines often involve a preliminary step. These are late-term procedures. In other words, 9 months, to stop the fetal heartbeat. to stop the baby's heartbeat. Its heart is beating. It has a heart. The heart is beating while in the womb. Okay, this is AI. This is done using a focused injection administered by the physician. Now, can you imagine going to medical school for what is it, 3-4 years? I don't know what, studying on how to save lives. And then after you get out, decide, I think I'll be a killer instead. That's a sick person. That's a sick person. Okay. By the focused injection to stop the heartbeat is done by the physician under ultrasound guidance. In other words, let's put this in perspective here. What you have here is the most innocent of tiny babies, enduring the same kind of lethal injection that's used on convicted murderers in death row. Tiny baby, the murderers in death row. In other words, they turn the mother's womb into an execution chamber. And make no mistake about it, that's what you have there. This is, I want you to, I'm going to show you a picture here. Put this in perspective for you. This is the baby in the womb at 9 months that they are giving a lethal injection to. Please don't tell me that is some sort of lifeless mass, that is some sort of just growth in the woman's womb. That is a baby that they are executing. They are executing. Now, you would think that no one would make a decision like that to kill this little baby here, slaughter it. But that they would make that decision lightly. Not so. Not in Massachusetts. They didn't take it lightly at all. In fact, they enjoyed signing the death certificate for our babies. Gary, can you bring up the video for us of these monsters laughing and clapping while the baby's execution warrant is signed? We did it. We killed him. What in the heck is going on? Governor Mengele. Oh, I'm sorry. Mara Healy, who claims, by the way, to be a Christian. Apparently, she didn't read the portion that Jesus' words about suffer the little children to come unto me, about better it is to have a millstone tied around your neck and cast into the deepest sea than to harm one of these children. Apparently, that Christian didn't read that part of the Bible or tore it up and threw it away. Okay. And there she is with her chortling, laughing, grinning acolyte signing the death certificate for babies, for unborn babies. That's sinister, that's sick, that's satanic. Matter of fact, here's what a real picture would show of that ceremony. Okay, there they are. Oh, way to go. We're going to kill them all. Yeah, that's who's pulling the strings there. All right. Yeah, that's who's pulling the strings there. Folks, look, the radical left is going to try and push this infanticide, this murder in the womb to every one of the states in the union, right? We have to fight it. And we have to fight to protect Dobbs, because they're going to try and bring back Roe versus Wade. And we have to go to state by state by state as conservatives, as conscientious human beings, for God's sake, and fight this murder of the infants tooth and nail. Because, folks, this is a baby just born. This is a little baby just born, a picture of a little baby just born. That's a human being. And yet you have this Mengele Mara up there in Massachusetts, and the governors of 9 other states okaying slaughtering babies like that in the womb. In 10% of the cases, the doctors have to go up and cut them out piece by piece in order to drag the little arms and legs out. Folks, enough of that. Enough of that. We got to fight it. Enough said. Enough said. All right. I know anyone reasonable, whether you're for reproductive rights or not, knows that's wrong. That's sick. That's sinister. That's satanic behavior. All right. On to that. I got to hurry on. I went on longer than I expected to in that, but I'm sorry. That's just devastating for anybody who's a decent human being to see that kind of slaughter of anyone laugh and chortle while they propagate that kind of slaughter. So there we are. So point 2 on your hot corner today. Trump has now said that he's prepared to walk away from Iran. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. You know, Trump says a lot of stuff. One of the things he says is we're going to walk away. And the fact is he's doing it. Iran is rearming. Iran is working on their nuclear missiles. Iran actually is still shooting missiles at countries around it. And we're doing nothing. Don't get into a war if you don't want to win, okay? What did General MacArthur say? In war, there's no substitute for victory. Somebody needs to knock on the Oval Office door and remind President Trump, whom I support, of what MacArthur said. Okay, what MacArthur said. Now, some of you may say, well, what happens if we walk away? Well, I'm going to tell you what happens if we walk away. You know, my father, as you know, some of you know, I've talked about in the past, was a Methodist minister, 50 years. And in every church he had, he would preach a series on Revelation, all right? And I remember as a young child, like 8 or 9 years old, being stunned when he would tell the congregation, because he was a pretty good Bible scholar, the United States is simply not in biblical prophecy. It's just not there. There's no use pretending it is when it's not. But other countries are. And when Trump says we're going to walk away, I want you to think about something. You don't have to be a Christian to understand this. Okay? You don't have to. Just hear me out. I'm going to read you a passage, okay? This is not a Christian podcast, but I think this may tell you what's unfolding in the world right now. How can the United States walk away? How can my father kept saying the U.S. is not in prophecy, in biblical prophecy? This is from the book of the Bible called Ezekiel. For those of you who have no idea in the world what's about between those two covers, it's called Ezekiel. It's 38:13. And just bear with me. But Sheba and Dedan and the young lion princes of Tarshish with whom she trades will ask, who are you to rob them of their silver and gold and drive away their cattle and seize their goods and make them poor? Now, let me put that in perspective for you so you understand what may be happening right now. You make the decision. Whether this is end times prophecy or not. You make the decision, but there's no doubt about what's happening. Let me define some terms here for you. Sheba and Dedan are the Arab countries, okay? They're the Arab countries. All the biblical scholars for centuries now have said, okay, those are the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, all those around. They're gone, okay? In this passage, they're just not, they're stepping back, okay? And the young lion princes of Tarshish. Tarshish is the European empires, okay? Bear with me here, stick with me. And they're asking something, with whom she trades. They're all trading with this country. And who is she? She is, ready? Magog and Rosh, which is Russia, Meshech, which is Turkey, and Persia. I don't have to tell you what that is, Iran. So they're asking these three countries, why are you invading Israel and taking everything from them? They're not saying stop. They're not preventing them. They're making it all about economics. It's all about economics and commerce. Why are you taking what they have? You know, oh, look, I'm not trying to interfere. We're just asking Russia, just asking Iran, just asking Turkey. The young lions of Tarshish. They are the former European colonies, including the country that now says it's walking away, unleashing Iran and its allies, Turkey and Russia. So there you go. There's an insight. Take it for what you think it's worth, okay? Take it for what you think it's worth. You know, if you're a pagan, you're going to say it's all nonsense. If you're somebody who's a little bit religious, and particularly if somebody who's very religious, you're going to say, uh-oh, who? It was unimaginable when I was a child that the United States would walk away from Israel. And when my father would say that, it was just unimaginable. I mean, I believed him as my father. He was a biblical scholar. There you have it. There's the prediction. There's the prophecy. And you know the reality. Okay? Take like Ezekiel 38:13 or not, believe it or not, there's the reality. Okay? So there's something you can at least discuss with people and make yourself look very, very intelligent and intellectual. All right. Then speaking of intellectual and intelligent, let's get out of the hot corner. Okay. Whew. That was a hot one. Both of those were very hot. I'm gonna need a drink of my yeah. Whew. Okay. Cool me down. It's my Gatorade. Speaking of intelligent, speaking of intellectual, now it's promised it's time to meet Mr. Wizard. Okay, time to meet Mr. Wizard. Remember, we're gonna have in the future every week a segment on Coffee with the Carterman with Mr. Wizard, and you're gonna say after this interview, you're gonna say, "I can't wait. I want to see that more than you, Carterman." Unfortunately, the man you're about to meet, Dr. Steve Allen, is the most brilliant, super educated gentleman I've ever met in my life. He is quite simply, as I've said repeatedly now, a genius, and he's a total insider. He's worked in Washington for about 40 to 50 years. I met him back when he was Jeremiah Denton's press secretary, which was a long time ago, back in the early 80s. And he lives right in the belly of the beast, okay? Just a couple blocks from the White House, from the Capitol building, from Congress. He is on all the insider meetings. So when he speaks, you can listen, take notes, because he knows of what he speaks. He knows of what he speaks. And now, without further ado, Dr. Steve Allen. Dr. Steve, how you doing?
Doing all right. Good to be with you.
There we go. There we go. Well, it is absolutely my pleasure, as you know, it always is when you and I talk. And we are going to do, because I know that you have insights that most of us don't have, and inside information. We're going to do kind of a rapid fire, okay? I'm going to fire some issues at you, and you give me your take, all right? Because your take, I have found time and time again, turns out to be pretty much right on target, and turns out to have information that the rest of us simply don't have. But first, I said you're the most educated man I know. I mean, I know you don't like to do this because you're also one of the most modest people I know, but you have a law degree, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And obviously you have a doctorate.
Yeah, PhD, science PhD, specifically in biodefense, which is things like pandemics and biological warfare. It's the intersection of biology and national security.
So let's be clear. This is not a Dr. Jill Biden type doctorate.
No. In fact, I used to defend her just on the grounds that we do call people with education doctorates, EDDs, we do call those people doctor. And I said, well, she has an EDD. She should be called doctor, just like everybody else who has an EDD. And we call, dentists doctors, and a number of people who are not physicians, for example, people like me. And I defended her. And then I got a copy of what passed for her dissertation, the paper that you have to write to get your degree. And I urge anyone, it's online. I urge anyone who is tempted to call her doctor to read this thing, because it reads like a paper for a freshman class that maybe you would give them a C or a D or something like that. It's just a joke. There are places where she adds up fractions and they don't even add up right. So she'll say this group is a third this, and then half this, and they're supposed to add up, and they don't. I mean, it's hilarious. It was obviously, I mean, this is given to her by a school where there was a Biden Institute. So obviously, this was a situation where she wanted a doctorate, and they gave her one. So I refuse in that case, in this rare case, I don't go by normal rule, which is to call someone doctor if technically they could be called that. So I don't even call Dr. Jill doctor. And it's particularly amusing because you have people. I remember Whoopi Goldberg on The View saying that wouldn't Dr. Jill Biden be great for Surgeon General of the United States? Whoopi doesn't even know the difference between an education doctorate, an EDD, and a medical doctorate, an MD. Doesn't even know the difference. And these are, of course, the people who are providing political advice for the people who watch TV. People
Right.
don't even know that.
Let me parenthetically say, personally, I'm a little offended by your saying that all she got was C's. When I went to Frostburg State College, I was a teak, right? Tau Kappa Epsilon fraternity. And at teak, we had a saying, anything above a C is wasted.
Well, that's what it is with these. So yeah, it's particularly offensive when some of us. I mean, my doctorate took 4 years, 2 years in the classroom, and 2 years of writing my dissertation, which was 149,000 words, and no, not all padding or anything like that. Remember, I'm a professional writer, so my reputation was on the line as far as the writing of it. 1,011 footnotes, because I knew no one would believe me when I made the claims that I made in my dissertation, unless I could prove it, or as Dan Bongino says, bring the receipts. And I did, and no one has ever challenged a word in it, even though I personally destroyed the reputations of some of our leading bioscientists in my dissertation, which is one reason that they didn't go along with me getting a job in the field later on. That's the price you pay.
Speaking of the reputations of some of the leading bioscientists, or whatever he calls himself, what did you think of the Fauci performance before the Senate committee, the 111 pleadings of the Fifth Amendment? What in the heck is going on with this little monster?
Here's what you have to know. Here's what you have to know. And it's interesting, by the way. I was writing a piece the other day, and sometimes I use a couple of AI agents to do fact checking, just to point out if there's something in there that's wrong. I don't want to ever be wrong about anything. I've never had to run a major correction in 53 years of being a paid journalist. I've never had to do that because I'm very, very careful. So one of the things you can do in AI that's actually good is you can use it as a double check on your fact checking. So once you've gone through the normal procedure, then you just throw it in there. And occasionally, it doesn't necessarily find something I've done wrong, but it will point out when I don't provide all the evidence that the computer thinks I should. And that points me, I can look at it and make a decision to either add more to that section or not. But it reminds me to really stay on the straight and narrow about making sure I have everything nailed down perfectly. So with regard to Fauci, it actually said I was being too easy on him because I was talking about the funding of the lab in Wuhan, where the virus leaked, and I was I guess I was allowing for the possibility of this, that, and the other. No, it said absolutely. It was. Then this is again programmed to be very skeptical. It's programmed to use liberal sources to check me. So it'll say, well, what about this article in the Progressive or Mother Jones, and I actually have to deal with it because I always want to be right. So it was saying, no, we know for a fact that this was the flow of money to the Wuhan lab from the US government through a nonprofit called the EcoHealth Alliance, who the head of which was buddies with Fauci. And so this reminded me when I was in the PhD program. So I got my master's in political science when I was 19. Then I got a law degree, and then I stayed out of school for many years. And I didn't really want to go back, but after 9/11, we needed experts in biodefense, so I was recruited for this program. And the big issue, the number one political issue that we talked about, that was contemporaneous, that was of that time when I was in the program, which was 2003 to 2007, was defensive biological weapons research. In other words, under the international treaty that bans biological weapons, to which we are a party, the Russians were a party, China, communist China is a party, they are legally bound by it. Can you do biological weapons research if the purpose is not to create a biological weapon, but to defend against a hypothetical weapon that might be created in the future? So the question was, can you do what we now refer to typically as gain of function research? And this was a major controversy. We would talk about this. And the people like Fauci, who said that you should, those were attacked by my friends on the left. They said,
Steve, let me make sure that we're clear here. What you're saying is they develop biological weapons, but they do it under the cover of saying, oh no, we're not making a biological weapon. We're making a mutant virus of some sort. In case they ever exist, we'll know how to fight them. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just wanted to reduce it to the sea level for people like me.
Right. That is exactly right. And it's like the worst case scenario. What's the worst thing we could end up fighting against in the future? So let's go ahead and create it now so that we can study it. And I know what you're thinking. But let me say, the people who wanted to do that were considered by my left-wing friends to be right-wing militarists who put the interests of like the U.S. military and all that sort of thing above the interests of humanity and the risk that this thing might get out. And remember, Fauci is quoted as saying at one point that this kind of research was, quote, worth the risk, unquote. And so that's why he did it. And again, this is not crazy conspiracy theory. This is something everyone was talking about and arguing about and saying we shouldn't do this kind of thing. Or those who argued that we should, were making that argument. And Fauci was one of those. So when people make it sound like you're making something up, that you imagine this idea of doing this kind of research, everyone knew about it. It's kind of like, remember that bit about there were biolabs in Ukraine?
Yes.
And that was censored from Facebook and the other media. They said anybody who said that was just trying to justify what Putin did in attacking Ukraine. Well, we weren't doing that. We were reporting the facts. And a friend of mine I was talking with, and I dug up out of my files press releases from biolabs in Ukraine that I had copies of that said, and we're going to have a reception tomorrow night, and our guest will be the president and first lady of Ukraine. And then a different president and first lady of Ukraine attended their fundraising dinner. And I had these from friends who were telling me, hey, you should get a job with these folks. Someone with your biodefense background, you should get a job with these folks in Ukraine.
So in Ukraine, they also, like Wuhan, had the gain of function, biolabs, right?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there were biolabs. There were labs studying pathogens that now, in other words, the difference might be that they weren't doing gain of function research. And I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying I don't have proof of
Okay.
that,
All right. All right. All
or
right.
or
Interesting.
evidence. And some of these people are friends of mine. I don't think they were doing it, but I don't trust anybody necessarily. My point is, when we said something that was unquestionably true, which was that there were biolabs in Ukraine, we were accused of being Putin's puppets,
Yeah.
and
Censors.
doing his bidding. So the same thing with when we talked about Fauci doing the gain of function research indirectly by using government money to fund the nonprofit that funded the research, and then everybody knew.
On coronavirus, on the
Yeah,
COVID virus,
yeah, hmm
that
yeah.
he was funding the research, which he denied he was doing. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2014, even Barack Obama outlawed gain of function research. So then, what did Fauci do?
Remember, I told you my lefty friends were against this, and it's like a lot of things, like unbridled immigration and tariffs, and a lot of things that the left is, they're on one side, and then when Trump takes a position or the Republicans take a position,
Yeah.
the lefties change their minds and go to the opposite side and pretend they never had the other position. They were against this. They were attacking people like Fauci. And then, of course, when Fauci became the face of opposition to Donald Trump, then they were suddenly, he is science. He is science.
He
When he said
is the
that, I
science.
am
As he
science.
said, I am the science. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and we had the emails where he was suppressing the story. I was one of the people. I was one of, at one point, it wasn't the Great Barrington Declaration, but there was an earlier letter that was signed by biologists, medical doctors, and others with expertise in the field to give advice to the president on how he should handle the pandemic. And there were, I think, 56 of us, and I was one of those. We were censored from social media because we now know the Biden administration was going to Facebook and people like that, Twitter, and saying, you don't carry these people. They're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. You need to get them up. So the idea that it came from the lab, that was censored until, I remember, May 25th of 2021. That was the day I was finally allowed to post, because by that point, there were too many distinguished scientists who said, well, it's kind of obvious this came from the lab. And it is. I mean, we knew that the Chinese were acting recklessly in the lab. And by the way, I refer to this as the Chinese biological weapons program, because I know communists, they don't do, quote, defensive biological weapons research. They use that as a cover for doing just biological weapons research. And in fact, the way this originated, the best information I have is that there was a cave. It was a bat virus. But what happens when you're developing biological weapons, you typically take something that's in your country, so you're familiar with it, and then you find something that's really bad, and then you make it worse. So, for example, my mentor, who ran he was the top scientist for the Soviet biological weapons program, and he's a great guy. He defected to our side, but he was the head scientist for the Soviets. They took a type of smallpox that normally kills 30%, and they made it kill 90%. So that's what you would do when you do gain of function. You would make it much worse, or you would take something that wasn't communicable between humans and you would change that so that it was. So what the Chinese were doing in this lab, that's what they were, in my view, they were working on biological weapons. It doesn't matter, because if you do this kind of research in a reckless way, it's still manslaughter for anybody that you kill. It's like if you're playing around making bombs in your basement and it blows up and it kills all your neighbors. You can't say, well, I didn't mean to kill all my neighbors. You were doing something inherently reckless at the highest level. So legally, this is my legal background, legally, you're responsible for that.
Was the Chinese or Fauci? See, I think Fauci is the one who ordained the gain of function research. That's what I believe.
No, Carter, you don't understand. Fauci went on Laura Ingram's show in February, I think it was February 18th of 2020. And he explained, when she brought this up, that, well, can we really believe what these Chinese scientists are saying? And he said, you can look up this clip, he said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I've known these scientists for 30 years, and they tell me they're not up to anything untoward. And I believe them because they're professionals. And I've known that these are people who work for the Communist Party of China. And even if they're good people, as you know, you do what the government tells you to do. You don't tell the government no if you're in China. And so these guys would have no. So they're doing this research. The French helped the Chinese build this lab, so they had warned people that the Chinese were being reckless, not running the lab. It's supposed to be BSL-4. That's the highest level of security. That's like where you walk around in spacesuits and you have glove boxes where you put your hands through to handle things, and you have high pressure showers before, so that you don't carry this pathogen outside the lab, that kind of thing. So that's called BSL-4, biosafety or biosecurity level 4. And that's what it's supposed to be doing. But they weren't doing that. They weren't following the procedures. And this is common in a lot of countries. They just don't have a culture of following proper procedures in certain ways. And so the Chinese did. So they had already had, reportedly, 2 SARS outbreaks from that lab. And remember, SARS is just another version of the Wuhan coronavirus, or what the Chinese call COVID. And so they had already had outbreaks. And then they had this one. The story is, and I don't know whether it's true, but it's one version, is that a guy got sick and gave it to his girlfriend. And that's totally plausible. And by the way, just so you know, and again, not crazy conspiracy theory, if you look up the Wikipedia entry, which is written by lefties mostly, if you look up the Wikipedia entry for the Russian flu of 1977, what you'll find is that scientists are in agreement that it came out of a lab. And the reason they are is that flu was genetically identical to the one from the 1950s. And flu virus mutates very quickly, which is why we have to have a different flu vaccine every year, because the flu virus mutates all the time. So if you have a flu virus today, or let's say 1977, and it's identical to the one from the 1950s, that can only be if it came from a lab where it had been frozen. And so we can't prove it, but we know from logic and from our experience that it had to have leaked out of a lab. And by the way, if you go back and check the epidemiology, we refer to it as the Russian flu, but it looks like that version actually got loose in China.
In China. So, let me ask you this. So yeah. I think you've made the point precisely that it came out of the Wuhan lab in China. Mm-hmm. And that Fauci denied that was the case. Denied it and denied it and denied it.
Even while in his own emails, he was discussing the possibility. He was also saying we need to suppress the story.
Suppress the story. So 2 questions. One, was his denial instrumental in the spread? And 2, what was his involvement in actually creating the gain of function research that resulted in it? Because I think Fauci's research, and correct me if I'm wrong, from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with Dr. Ralph Baric, his coronavirus gain of function research, he sent to China, to the Wuhan lab, after Barack Obama outlawed the further research here in the U.S. Right or wrong?
Well, my theory is that they, and this is based on serious reporting, that there was a mine that was 600-700 miles away from Wuhan, and that there were, I believe, 5 mine workers who came down with this. They were cleaning out the bat guano, the bat poop, and they came down with it, and a couple of them, 2 or 3, died. And there are various reports, and this is how you get biological weapons typically. So even when it's in another country, like Ebola, the Russians would send a team to wherever country had a weird outbreak, and they would get samples of that. But typically, they would get stuff from their own country. So things they were familiar with. So, for example, rabbit fever was weaponized by the Soviet Union they actually used it against the Nazis in World War II during the siege of Stalingrad. And some of their own people got sick as well, but they achieved the purpose, which was to defeat the siege of Stalingrad. And they did this using rabbit fever. So biological weapons go back a long time. They just get more and more sophisticated. And so, but they used rabbit fever because that was endemic in the Soviet Union. So you use stuff that you're familiar with. And so I think they sent a team. They got samples. They brought it back. And then they said, oh, this is cool. We can play with this and make it more deadly, more likely to spread between humans, etc. And we'll do it. Now, Fauci was funding it because Fauci was giving grants to the EcoHealth Alliance, which in turn was funding the lab in Wuhan. And this was, known, and everyone should have been careful about this. I've got a piece. Even someone like Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation funded that lab, but they did it on something completely different. But the point is, at the time they funded it, they knew, or should have known, it was public knowledge to the degree that that lab was up to funny stuff, and they shouldn't have funded it. And you know how it is with money is fungible, right? So you often a left-wing group, you'll give them money to teach people how to read. Okay, so you give them money, and then they use it to stage demonstrations against Republicans or whatever.
So Fauci knew what was going on in Wuhan, and he was working with Barrick to use the same gain of function on coronavirus at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then he was forced to go ahead and join forces with Wuhan. Right? You
are absolutely correct that he was violating the rule of the Obama administration. Because remember, I told you it was my lefty friends who were the most against this back before it became something where they had to defend Fauci, and then they just switched sides.
Well, no wonder that little weasel took the fifth 111 times, because he is more than knee deep in this. He's over his head in the corona, in COVID, in the spread, in the development and the spread of COVID.
Right. And remember, Fauci was the guy. If you go back and look at any footage of the AIDS protests where the people were saying, you're not funding AIDS research enough, back in the 80s. And if you look closely, you will see posters with Fauci's picture on them. Right. And he was the villain. And then, in my theory, and I believe this is backed up, why do people on the left come up with this story that Ronald Reagan didn't care about AIDS, which is nonsense? He hated gay people. He didn't hate gay people. He was head of the Screen Actors Guild. Goodness sake, you don't get that job if you hate gay people in Hollywood. He never hated gay people. He never said and they got what they deserved, or these things they've been putting in his mouth. Remember that movie that with James Brolin playing Reagan, and supposedly Reagan was trying to get all the gay people to die. Nonsense. And Reagan sent his HHS secretary, Margaret Heckler, to hug
Reagan. One of Reagan's best friends was Johnny Mathis. One of Reagan's best friends for years was Johnny Mathis. He is one. You can't get any gayer than Johnny Mathis. Parenthetically, I took a girl to a concert of Johnny Mathis in 1964, right? In Indiana. And after the concert, Johnny Mathis' aides came up and said, Mr. Mathis would like to see you backstage in the dressing room. And I said to my date, oh, good, let's go back and meet him. And the aides said, oh, no, not her, just you. And
well, I think
Reagan's friend. Right.
I think I told you there was a period when I was doing some acting, and I was on one job, and Kevin Spacey was there.
My God.
And he didn't hit on me. I was too old. But a very good-looking actor friend of mine came over to me and said, well, guess what? Kevin Spacey just hit on me.
Oh, yeah. So Reagan was definitely not anti-homosexual.
Oh, no. But Fauci managed by the end of, like Larry Kramer, remember there was the playwright who started the act.
He was the head of the Act Up, and he wanted to kill Fauci because Fauci was spreading so many stories.
And then they became best buddies. And I interviewed some of the people who were involved in ACT UP. And I would say to them, now you're a Marxist, right? And they go, oh, yeah, sure. their goal was, yes, it was the AIDS activism, but they also wanted to use it against Reagan. And so essentially, and this is my theory, but it's grounded in what happened, and that is they go to Fauci and they mutually agree that they're going to shift the blame from Fauci to Reagan. And with Fauci's help, of course, he doesn't want to be the great villain in history on AIDS. So he
Just
goes
a
along with
worm.
this
He's
and
just
supports this, and they make Reagan the bad guy.
he's just a disgusting little worm. All right,
Yeah.
I think I think you have established Fauci, as I said, was not knee deep. He's over his head in the development of the COVID virus. I mean, nobody has established that better than you have, or nobody could, because it's remarkable that your knowledge of this. Of course, your doctorate is in it. So let's put Fauci aside here, because and I and no, let me do one more thing, because here's where you and I are probably going to disagree some, because you're one of the nicest guys in the world, and as you know, I've always played very hardball politics. I think that the whole hearing where Fauci took the Fifth Amendment 111 times, more than any mafia figure in history. Um, I think the whole thing was a charade, because I think Rand Paul is not going to do anything about it. Fauci will never, ever be incarcerated. And he turns it over to Todd Blanche, who is famous for being all talk and no walk. And I think it is a typical, and let me add this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, because I'm quoting Dr. Larry Hunter, who I think did a great paper on it recently, op-ed, I think on Lou Rockwell. The Rand Paul had the power right at that hearing to have the Capitol Police arrest Fauci and incarcerate him, because he took the Fifth when he already had a pardon. He was violating the law. And so I think, again, it's typical Washington political, all talk and no action. What do you think?
Well, I think you're mostly right about the Fifth Amendment. There were a couple of things. One is he gave a statement at the beginning, and that negates your Fifth Amendment privilege. Remember, this came up during the Lois Lerner case, the woman who
Right.
was the IRS person in charge of shutting down the Tea Party and using the IRS to shut down the Tea Party movement. And she did the same thing, but she basically got away with it. And I think Fauci figured he would get away with it. Look, there is a problem for Rand Paul and the others, and that is, you don't have Republican control of Congress. Oh yeah, I know of the Senate. I know technically you have a majority in the Senate, but that includes people like Murkowski. Collins, I cut her a little bit of a break because she is in a difficult position, but Murkowski could be a conservative, and she's not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She's a crook. I mean,
She's a crook.
yeah. I mean, she twice was denied nomination by the Republicans in Alaska, and the national Republicans decided to treat her as the Republican nominee, and they managed to push her through the last time with ranked choice voting, which is a form of vote fraud.
And let's keep in mind, Murkowski was appointed to the Senate originally by her crooked father, who was governor.
Right, exactly. And so this is somebody who shouldn't be there, but she is, and she's a problem. And then you have a few others that were like that, and to the point where I don't know that there would be a majority for taking action against. I mean, we're going to find out, I guess. The answer probably is no. That there's not a majority in the Senate for doing something about Fauci, and he will probably get away with it. Now, the pardon is part of that. Remember, Rand Paul, one of the things he asked him was, tell me what you did on a certain topic outside the range of the pardon. In other words, he was specifically looking for things that were not included in the pardon, which was probably auto-pinned, but we're not going to win on that one either, probably, on that issue. And so remember, the pardon went back to 2014 to cover all the stuff that has been coming out about, what Fauci was doing prior to the Wuhan coronavirus becoming an issue. But Rand Paul asked him specifically about that. So that's something he could theoretically be prosecuted for. And obviously, if he committed perjury now, he could be prosecuted. But that's one reason he doesn't answer any questions. You can't be charged with committing perjury if you just kept your mouth shut or just said over and over again what the Fifth Amendment was. And that's why you do it. So I think he's.
Yeah. So now it goes to Todd Blanche, who has a history of never doing anything. I mean, look, you're a lawyer, and I know we got to move along. I have one more question after this, but look, if I am Donald Trump, okay, I want to point out I have more hair than Donald Trump now. Donald is receding hairline, but if I were Donald Trump, I would not appoint as Attorney General of the United States, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, a lawyer who had lost every case that he had defended me in. What in the heck is going on there? This guy he defines incompetent, and he's never succeeded in charges against anyone.
Look, in the first Trump administration, they had a problem that they trusted a lot of people who had been around, knew what they were doing, had run government agencies, etc. And then those people became, they acted horrifically. And by that, I mean, some of them tried to overthrow the government. I'm talking about the people in the intelligence community who tried to frame Trump as a Russian asset. And who spied on Trump using fake FISA warrants and so on. That to me, I mean, I love all these people who talk about, the folks who invaded the Capitol or had a riot at the Capitol as if that somehow could overthrow the government. I don't know how. Nobody's ever been. I've asked people, I've said, I'll give you $20 if you'll tell me how that could end up with them overthrowing the government, and they can't answer the question. But here were people who actually were, and they're defended by the left. And I mean, they make TV movies about, James Comey and what a great guy he was when he was somebody who tried to overthrow the government. And, take an elected official and you discredit him using false information and that is false, or unless you're a lunatic, you do. They did that. They did it. And then we caught them, and there's no question about it. But my lefty friends don't know anything about it. A friend of mine who's got 140 IQ actually said to me, she's a lefty. And I wonder how she's a lefty. And she said, "Oh, no. What you say can't be true about Biden taking bribes and all that. Because if that were true, it would be in the New York Times." and that's how she sees it. So
that's what's known as an idiot. I'm going to frame a theory for you, and we'll go out on this because I need to get to my prediction of the day. I have a theory, all right? And your mouth may drop open and you may say, you know what? Sometimes you come up with stuff that is just bizarre. But here's my theory. Hold on, I got to plug in this. My battery thing came on. Folks, bear with me while I do some technology here.
While you do this, could I comment on your opening? And that is, I did a piece in 2022. I looked at the polls, and only about, depending on how you word the question, anywhere from 10 to 20% of people support late-term abortions. It's only 40, at that time, it was only 42% of liberal Democrats who supported late-term abortion. But most people don't know what's going on because the media just report that as the governor of Massachusetts being a hero and protecting abortion rights and all that, or protecting reproductive rights, whatever. Most people don't know. If you ask people who said they supported Roe versus Wade, and if you ask them what was Roe versus Wade, 70% of the supporters of Roe versus Wade couldn't tell you anything about it other than, it's for a woman having the right to choose.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons we have Coffee with the Carterman, and why we're going to have the Meet Mr. Wizard segment with you every week. So, all right, my screwball theory, we're going to have to wait till next week when we have you on again as the wizard, because we got to go. We're almost out of time, and I need to do my bold prediction of the week. All right. Okay. All right. My bold prediction of the week. And folks, to set the stage for my bold prediction of the week, I need to show you a picture. Gary, can you bring me up on full screen here, and then we'll get this whole thing here, this whole picture up here. The almost all of us are familiar with this picture, folks. The young lady in the blonde wig assaulting the real blonde should have not only been thrown out of the game, she should have been charged with assault. There's no doubt about it. That is just like when a couple of weeks ago when the young lady decided to knock Caitlin Clark to the ground and punch her in the throat. Those are dangerous assaults, both of those. And yet, I'm getting to my prediction of the week now. The coach of Caitlin Clark's team and Sophie Cunningham's team defended both of those assault cases. To put in perspective how awful that defense. She defended the assaultants against her own team. Unheard of. Let's roll this quick clip from David Portnoy commenting on that, which I think is right on target. Then I'll give you my prediction.
Stephanie White, I've been a defender, the coach of the Fever. Get her out of there. Get her out of there. Fire her ass today. I don't want her back on that bench. Stop defending the other players. Oh, she plays hard, DJ. That's just her being her. You see Caitlin in the press conference almost cover her ears and her eyes. Defend your players. First of all, you're wrong. It was a dirty play. She's gone. But when do you ever see in like the NBA, a coach not defend their own players? She hasn't done it with Caitlin when Caitlin got punched in the throat. She didn't do it. I don't care if you agree with it or not. You're wrong. But it starts to make me think you care more about the overlying social issues and not pissing off other people in the league and saying men can play in the league because she's one of those players. Coaches, when asked, always is taking the far left side of it. This isn't politics. Your player got assaulted. Defend your player in the press conference. Be like, yeah, that was a dirty play. She should have hit the showers. She acts like she's the coach of the other team. I don't care if she's the best X's and O's, when she's not. Get her the hell out of there. Either defend your players or get lost.
Okay, excellent. Now that coach of the Caitlin and Sophie's team is a DEI coach. She's a terrible coach, and she always was. Okay? And she defends the worst element in that league. And here's my prediction. If that happens, the WNBA is going to go back in playing in high school gyms. That's my prediction. Mr. Wizard, what do you think?
Well, I tend not to follow sports closely unless they have quarterbacks in them. So but yeah, this is pretty ridiculous. And the idea of the infection of wokeness into a major, to the point where we're seeing this, and we're seeing people being assaulted based on their so-called race, on their sexual orientation, and that's what you're having here. And then those people doing the assault being defended or justified, and it's called white privilege if somebody complains about this behavior. Disgusting. And there are the old expression that we referred to, rhinos, keep it small and keep it all. Sometimes you don't want your organization to succeed, because then you won't control it. You won't control it.
All right. Well said, folks. That's it. That's a wrap. That is a wrap. You have I told you it was going to be a great show. Thanks to Dr. Steve, Mr. Wizard.
Good to be with you.
We will be back next week. In the meantime, get out there, continue to fight the good fight. Let's do this thing.